Rome wasn't just built on marble and conquest, it was built on bread. Feeding the largest empire the world had ever seen wasn't just about strategy or strength. It was about calories, consistency, and the daily ritual of putting food in the mouths of 1 million people. And no food was more important than bread. But here's the strange part. The Romans ate bread daily. So how is it that a civilization that lived on bread had fewer issues digesting it, while modern bread leaves so many of us feeling bloated, sensitive, or unsatisfied? Step into a Roman bakery just for a moment. Dust in the air, heat from the oven, flour-stamped loaves lined up on a wooden table. These weren't luxury bakeries for the elite. They were high-volume, regulated production sites that fed entire cities. How did Rome standardize and supply bread across an empire without modern factories, preservatives, or plastic wrap, and without destroying your gut in the process? And more importantly, what did they understand about bread that we have somehow forgotten? If you're into ancient solutions that still make sense today, hit subscribe. Some knowledge deserves to be baked back into memory. Now, let's step in for real. It's early morning in Pompeii. The city is already alive. Carts rumble over stone streets, the scent of olives, smoke, and ash drifting in the air. But behind a wooden door, something quieter is happening. Flour dust hangs in shafts of sunlight. A blindfolded donkey walks in circles, turning a stone mill that groans under the weight of grain. You hear the scrape of wooden paddles, the soft clank of jars, the hush of heat from the oven. This is a Roman bakery, not a private kitchen, a commercial space where hundreds of loaves were baked daily. At the back, a domed oven glows with fire. Workers shape dough into rounds, score the tops, and slide them into the mouth of the oven. Some loaves are plain, just flour, water, salt. Others are studded with olives, figs, or nuts. Just before baking, a mark is pressed into each one. Not for branding, for accountability. Because in Rome, when bread mattered this much, trust had to be baked in. We know this not just from texts, but from the city itself. Pompeii's sudden burial in ash preserved dozens of carbonized loaves, still stamped, still round, still scored, into 8 wedges like a gear. These weren't decorative, they were practical. Easy to portion, easy to share. This wasn't a world of brioche or fluffy rolls. Roman bread was dense, rustic, fuel for the day ahead. Baked in bulk by trained bakers, often enslaved, meeting enormous demand. And it wasn't just for the rich. Bread was the backbone of the Roman diet, for citizens, soldiers, and laborers alike. But how do you feed an entire city or an army without supermarkets, machines, or preservatives? The answer lies beyond the bakery, in the system that delivered grain, regulated quality, and turned bread into one of the most powerful tools of Roman control. The Romans knew how to make bread at scale, but without wrecking your gut. At its peak, the city of Rome alone may have required 200,000 loaves of bread per day just to keep people alive. And to do that, the Romans built one of the most sophisticated grain supply chains the world had ever seen. It started with grain, mostly wheat, sometimes barley, imported from Egypt, North Africa, and Sicily. These were not random purchases. Rome's empire was structured around feeding itself. Grain was not just a crop, it was a political resource. The Roman state controlled trade routes, ports, and fleets of grain ships that moved harvests across the Mediterranean like clockwork. Once the grain arrived, it was offloaded into massive horia, the public granaries, stone and brick storage warehouses that kept the supply dry, protected, and ready. From there, grain could be milled, portioned, and distributed to bakeries across the city. And here is the key. Rome had a state-supported grain dole, the annona, that gave subsidized or even free grain to hundreds of thousands of Roman citizens. Why? Because food meant stability. When bread is available, people stay calm. When bread runs out, cities burn. So Rome did not take chances. The empire kept stocks of grain for emergencies, managed prices to avoid riots, and held bakers to strict standards. The result was not luxury, but it was reliability. A Roman citizen knew they would eat. In ancient Rome, bread kept the peace. This is where we get the phrase, bread and circuses. But to do that, it had to be reliable, standardized, available every single day. But what made it reliable, day after day, with no barcode scanners, no digital inventory? Let us take a closer look at how Roman bakers were held accountable, and what happened if they cut corners. Imagine you're a baker in ancient Rome. It's early morning. The coals in your oven are glowing hot. The scent of sour, coarse dough fills the air. You've been up since before sunrise, shaping loaves by hand, dusting them with flour, pressing your seal into each one before sliding them into the fire brick oven. Why the seal? Because if your bread is too light, if it's underbaked, if a customer bites into it and finds it moldy or misshapen, that seal is your name, your reputation. And in Rome, that meant something. Maybe you thought no one would notice if you shaved off a bit of the flour ration today. Maybe you rushed the baking to meet a quota. But the wrong inspector or the wrong customer could cost you everything. A short loaf wasn't just bad business, it was a public offense. And the consequences? They did not stop at a fine. Punishments could be public, dragged through the streets with your flour-covered shame on full display. Or worse, banned from baking entirely. In rare cases, even exile. One bad batch could end your livelihood, because in Rome, bread was not just food. It was stability. That is why the state got involved, heavily. Prices were fixed. Weights were checked. Ingredients were regulated. Entire market officials, called aediles, were responsible for keeping the system fair. Not to make bread fancy, but to make it dependable. When a city's survival depends on grain shipments arriving on time, on bakers producing thousands of loaves a day, and on citizens getting their daily ration without riots, you cannot afford inconsistency. Being a baker in Rome was not just a trade, it was a civic responsibility, a high-stakes job, and every stamped loaf was a promise you had done it right. So what exactly went into those loaves? What made it so different from what we call bread today? At first glance, Roman bread was simple, but behind that simplicity was a system, and a secret we've mostly forgotten. Daily bread in Rome wasn't a side dish, it was the dish, eaten by nearly everyone, from soldiers to senators. But unlike today's supermarket slices, built for softness and shelf life, Roman loaves had a different job: fuel the body, not fight it. So what made it work? The ingredients were startlingly simple. Coarse ground flour, water, salt, and thyme. No commercial yeast, no additives, no mystery emulsifiers, just a wild starter, a living mixture of flour and airborne bacteria, left to ferment slowly. That slow fermentation didn't just create flavor, it transformed the bread from the inside out, breaking down gluten and unlocking nutrients in ways modern bread often doesn't. Most Roman loaves were leavened with pasta madre, a kind of sourdough starter passed from baker to baker, sometimes lasting generations. This natural fermentation gave the bread its rise, its sour tang, and its digestibility. That's why Roman bread could be a daily staple. Soldiers ate it on the march. Laborers filled up on it before a shift. Children gnawed it with olive oil or honey. But not all loaves were the same. If you were poor, your bread was darker, made from barley or whole wheat. Tougher, yes, but richer in fiber and minerals. If you were rich, you might get white bread, made from sifted, imported flour, baked in cleaner ovens. Still, most Romans, especially in the working class, ate local, rougher loaves shaped in round molds and scored into wedges for sharing. Also, not every loaf was made to be eaten fresh. When bread needed to last, for legions on the march or ships at sea, the Romans did not reach for preservatives. They changed the bread itself. They made panis nauticus and bucellatum, dry, dense loaves, baked twice or left in longer to drive out moisture, hard as stone. Shelf-stable for weeks, even months, designed to be dunked in wine, broth, or oil to soften before eating. Even the sourness had a function. Fermentation made Roman bread more acidic, a natural defense against mold and bacteria. The lower the pH, the longer the loaf could last, naturally. Storage helped too. Bread was kept dry, aired out, and sometimes wrapped in cloth to breathe. No plastic, no chemicals, just knowledge passed down through generations. So let's come back to the real mystery. How did an entire civilization eat bread every day at scale without the bloating, fatigue, or sensitivities so many people feel today? The answer doesn't lie in one thing. It lies in everything. In the bread itself, made from coarser grains, natural starters, and long fermentation. In the process, slow, local, microbial. In the system, regulated weights, marked loaves, civic responsibility baked into every batch. And in the values, that food should nourish, not just fill. Rome didn't need commercial yeast, preservatives, or ultra-soft fluff. They needed bread to work, every day, for everyone. That's why their loaves were dense, tangy, fresh, honest, made to be eaten soon, or preserved by process, not chemicals. It was a different approach, not better, not worse, but built around needs we no longer design for. And maybe that's the real loss. Because when you look at the Roman system, grain routes, public trust, skilled hands, daily dependability, you start to wonder, how did the Romans get bread right? And how did we end up with bread that so often leaves us feeling worse? Could slow bread make a comeback in a fast world? So what do you think? Have we lost something essential in our rush for convenience? Let me know in the comments. And if this kind of ancient wisdom still makes sense today, hit subscribe. Some knowledge deserves to be baked back into memory.